In the name of God, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I should express my gratitude from Schiller Institute for organizing this meeting, particularly from Mrs. Laroche and her colleagues. Secondly, I should appreciate and admire the informative speech of Mrs. Laroche, which exempted me from part of what I wanted to tell. And I don't want to repeat all those things. The topic of my speech is the global consequences of instability in the Middle East, which is in continuation of what Mrs. Laroche mentioned. Before going to the content of what I want to say, first of all, we should understand what is Middle East. Because according to classical texts, Middle East briefly is Arab world plus Iran. And according to some categories, Turkey also is included in Middle East. But nowadays, regarding what is happening in Afghanistan and Pakistan and the consequences of those groups who have been active and trained in that area in the whole Middle East, I think we cannot exclude Afghanistan and Pakistan from the Middle East. Middle East importance is in a couple of areas. One is its geographical importance. Middle East is a bridge between three continents, Asia, Africa, and Europe. And very important transit channels is existing in Middle East, maybe the most important of them all over the world, like Suez Channel, Hormuz Strait, Persian Gulf, even Jabal al-Tariq, Bab al-Mandab. These are very crucial for world economy. Another importance of Middle East is economic importance. Almost 2/3 of the energy which is exported to the civilized world is produced and passing through Middle East. The cultural importance of Middle East is not ignorable. Middle East is cradle of civilization. The most important civilizations of human beings since thousands of years back have been born in Middle East, in Mesopotamia, in Iran, in various countries of Middle East. And last but not least, its political importance, because nowadays, and since 20th century, the most crucial crisis, political crisis all over the world, were stemmed from Middle East. Now, after this brief introduction, I want to point out to the coming points: the root causes of instability in the Middle East, global and regional consequences of instabilities, double standard behavior, and pointing out to three important issues which nowadays in Middle East is the concern of the global intellectuals: Syrian crisis, Gaza conflict, and Iranian nuclear issue. Middle East is the origin of many religions and civilizations. All Abrahamic religions are based on peace, and for centuries, followers of different religions have been living peacefully with each other in Middle East. It is interesting for all of you to know that during the Crusade War, all Christians, Jews, and Muslims were together for defending Jerusalem and Beit al-Muqaddas from the invaders of those days, Europeans. So actually the Crusade War was not a religious war, because in the Middle East, all religions were defending from their identity, their civilization, and their land. I remember once I was in a meeting, and Samuel Huntington, who established this strange theory of clash of civilizations, he was talking about clashes between Christianity and Jewish, according to him, the same category with Islam and Buddhism, etc. I raised my hand and I told him, Professor Huntington, why you don't mention that during the Crusade War, Middle Eastern Jews and Christians were defending from their land shoulder to shoulder and along with the Muslims? He responded me very strangely. He said that according to us, when we are talking about Christianity, we believe Christians in the West. In other words, the Christians at the other parts of the world maybe are second-grade Christians or are not Christians. This is what he said. I'm quoting him. Therefore, the atmosphere, the historical and cultural atmosphere, original historical and cultural atmosphere of Middle East is not competence with clashes and crisis, or rather, it is competence with peace. But why it did not occur? The root cause of current instabilities in Middle East goes back to divide and rule policy followed by global powers in the region, particularly by Britishers, since early 20th century. After World War I, one of the main goals of Allied forces, particularly Britishers and French, was disintegration and vanishing of Ottoman Empire. Well, they had their historical problems with them since 16th century. And after Ottoman Empire became the sick man of the Europe, they availed the opportunity and they believed that now is the time for revenging all those inconveniences that we have had with the Ottoman Empire. Therefore, just after World War II, they tried to plan new borders and artificial divisions in the Middle East. Of course, the memory of Crusade War also was very much effective in this decision. Sykes, the British expert, as well as Picot, the French, in early 20s, they draw the new borders in the Middle East, which were completely artificial, and they were not according to historical realities. They created artificial countries. Iraq is one of them. Although, as Mrs. LaRouche mentioned, Baghdad, 1,000 years ago, was a glorious capital of culture all over the world, particularly in the Muslim world. But Iraq, in the shape that we have nowadays, was not and did not have that historical authenticity and originality. Turkey as well. The Turkey nowadays that is existing, when you go through the history, it was not like this. Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, even Saudi Arabia. All these borders were drawn artificially with the aim of divide and rule. And this was the reason that various ethnicities, various minorities were planted in all countries. So the ethnic problems, the inter-ethnic problems was created in that part of the world. Kurd Arab, Shia Sunni, Darruzi Sunni, etc., etc., Wahhabi and other Sunnis. And seems that both of those who drawn these borders and Stalin have studied at the same school, because Stalin, when drawn the borders of republics of ex-Soviet Union, he did the same. He separated, he disintegrated Tajikistan and separated part of that and gave it to Uzbekistan. And even nowadays, it is a matter of conflict between these countries, or Armenia and Azerbaijan. The other reason, and of course these artificial borders, apart from ethnic problems, it created another very important problem, which by passing the time, its importance is more visible, which is water problem. The rivers, which for hundreds of thousands of years were irrigating the lands in Middle East without any problem, they were divided in various countries. And nowadays you see that what is the root problem between Syria and Turkey, Iraq and Turkey? This is Tigris and Euphrates. Another root of instability in the Middle East is the creation of Israel and providing unconditional support for that. Well, they tried to make an ideological reason for creation of Israel. Here is not a conducive time and place for having this historical argument, but I think it has been discussed enough that even among the Jews themselves, that Israel was not the land of the Jews which have been promised by Prophet Moses. The creation of Israel was after the Balfour's declaration, then British Foreign Minister in 1917, and they encouraged the Jews of Eastern Europe, interestingly, not Western Europe, because the Jews in Western Europe had a good economic condition. And the Jews in Eastern Europe could cause problem for them and for whole Western Europe, particularly after creation of communism. They encouraged the Jews of Eastern Europe to go to the Middle East, and their immigration was not in a natural way. Although at first days it was only about purchasing the lands, but after creating a community, then the clashes between that community and original inhabitants of that area started. And from that time, which was mid-20s, up to now, within about 90 years, these clashes is intensifying day by day. Another route is supporting of corrupted and inefficient dictatorship governments in the Middle East. Middle East and Iran is one of the oldest birthplace of democracy. In 1905, in Iran, constitutional revolution happened, and Iran's monarchy changed to a constitutional monarchy. But it did not repeat other places. Even in Turkey, it was something different. In Middle East, almost all countries were under dictatorship, and although democracy, as in West, they claim that is their basic principle, this principle was not valid in Middle East. And the best allies of West in the Middle East were the most dictators. Nowadays, it is completely clear for everybody. And the Western powers, for a while Britishers and then Americans, and of course French, they did their best for appeasing of democracy voices and independent voices in the whole Middle East. If you go to the contemporary history, you can find a lot of instances regarding that. Even Soviet Union, which wanted to have a rivalry with then West, and they wanted also to have a presence in the Middle East, they supported dictators, and they did not support any democracy. Interestingly, they supported those regimes who have massacred Communist Party members in their countries, like Iraq and Syria. They supported Ba'ath Party. Ba'ath Party is a party with a specific ideology, but supported by Westerners. The architecture of Ba'ath was Michel Aflaq, a Christian Syrian who has been studying in France. And Ba'ath Party always was supported both by Soviet Union and Westerners. It's really irony. Another route is intervention and occupation to control natural resources. Because as I told, the majority of oil production in the world is in Middle East. In other words, Middle East is like a heart of the body. Heart of body is pumping blood. And Middle East is pumping fuel to the economy. And for the Western countries, having control on natural sources, on energy sources in the Middle East was very crucial. The first appeasement of West to the movement which was against this control was in Iran. In 1951, when Dr. Mossadegh's government, a completely democratically elected government, came to power and nationalized Iranian oil industry. And after 2 years, by help of Britishers and Americans, in a military coup, not in an election, he was toppled down and he was jailed. And many of his followers were jailed and killed. Of course, Madeleine Albright, then Foreign Minister of the United States, a few years back, in one of her speeches, she said that, yes, we are very sorry about that. And there were many other instances. The recent instance of that, one was supporting of Iraqi war against Iran. Saddam Hussein was provoked by the Americans, and nowadays it is revealed that the then chairman of Defense Committee of Reagan administration, who became Donald Rumsfeld during the Junior Bush as a defense minister, he went to Iraq, he met Saddam Hussein, and now all documents have been revealed even in a film. And unfortunately, even a country like Germany, in this country, the companies were those who were supporting Saddam Hussein by chemical weapon technology. And this was Saddam Hussein who used chemical weapon against Iran. It was the first time after World War I, which caused 100,000 casualties. And nowadays, majority of them are having different types of cancers, and they are dying day by day after 20 years. The second recent instance was occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan in the 21st century, which Madame Larouche mentioned some reasons of that. I don't want to repeat it. But now it is quite obvious for everybody that it was by fraud documentation to make a file against them, either because of September 11th or because of so-called alleged mass destruction weapons in Iraq, and this tragedy happened, which caused about 1 million casualty of indigenous and local people. Madame Larouche mentioned about the casualties of Americans. I don't want to repeat it. But 1 million people in Iraq and Afghanistan were killed, directly or indirectly, because of sanctions, because of weapons, because of radioactive weapons, weak radioactive weapons which the United States used against them, and because of many reasons. The other root cause is supporting of sectarian and separatist groups. As I mentioned, due to the artificial borders, ethnic groups were puzzled together. And these ethnic problems were provoked and were fueled. Supporting extremist groups, as an example, the British, who were very much helpful and supporter of creation of Wahhabism or Salafism in 19th century. Nowadays, many documents, including Mr. Humphrey, the then diplomat, British diplomat, book has been published that how he encouraged Abdul Wahhab and how he helped him to create a new fraction in Islam, extremist fraction, which nowadays, even after more than 1 century and a half, we are causing problems of Salafism and Al-Qaeda due to this origin. Supporting separatist groups in Iran, Iraq, Turkey, etc., like Kurds, Arabs, Baluchs. Again, it is not a hidden issue that, for instance, the separatist Kurd groups of Turkey or Iran, like PKK, are living peacefully here in Germany. Their leaders. And whenever there is any operation, a terrorist operation in Iran or in Turkey, those leaders who are living here in Germany, they claim that, yes, this happened. And no one asks them that, why this happened, who are you, what are the links between them. I hope once Verfassung Schulz puts her efforts on these type of conspiracies. And recently, the creation of concept of Shia crescent, a new manifestation of divide and rule to abuse religious differences. You recall a few years back, first of all, King Abdullah, the king of Jordan, said that, look, this is a big danger that Shia who are living from Lebanon to Syria, Iraq, part of Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Iran, Bahrain, Pakistan, Afghanistan, this is like a crescent, and this crescent is the real cause of instability and war in the region. This was the first time that he mentioned. Ironically, King Abdullah's ancestors were Shia. This was supported by Saudi Arabia. Although Saudi Arabia apparently had a warm diplomatic relation with Iran, the biggest, largest Shia country. But in the cases which we could agree very easily, like Lebanon civil war or Iraq civil war, they, due to this phobia, I call it phobia of Shia crescent, they refrained from any kind of reconciliation. And you see what is now the situation in the region. And one of the most important reasons of instability of Middle East is double standard behaviors. Double standard behaviors of West. Well, the values are the same. When you believe that democracy or human right is a value, this is not confined in certain countries. Human rights in every country should be a value, should be respected, and violation against that should be protested. Now I'm asking you, beheading of those who have been accused because of criminals, or cutting the hands, according to Western norms, definitely is against human rights, is against this value. But the best ally of the West in our region is beheading people. Of course, I don't recommend you to look to this Twitter episode. Once in Twitter was a film that a Malaysian woman, she was a maiden in Saudi Arabia, working for a Saudi family. It was alleged that she has killed her master. She was beheaded in one of the city's square, and the helicopter took her hand, flight around the city to show it to the people to learn lesson. It was in Twitter. And no one in any of Western countries did not say any word. This is a double standard. But when someone in a country which is not in agreement with West is taken to the jail, all human rights centers allege many things, right or wrong. Democracy is a universal value. Everybody likes democracy. Even Islam is completely in accordance with democracy. But ironically, we see that the money of the countries who have not even tasted democracy and never let democracy to rise in their country are paying money for the opposition in Syria for protection of democracy, and this money is paid by instruction of Western countries who alleged and claimed that they want to prevail democracy in Syria. It is really a joke. Once in one of the conferences like this, I mentioned that in 21st century we are witnessing two very, very funny and funniest jokes. One is that Israel, with 300 nuclear warhead, is concerned about Iranian nuclear activity, which doesn't have even one small weapon, and no one has claimed it. Secondly, that those countries are paying, like Qatar and Saudi, are paying a lot of money and supporting to the oppositions in a country like Syria for establishing democracy. These are real funny jokes. These are instances and examples of double standard. In Bahrain, when the majority rise up and protest against dictatorship and discrimination of their government, and when Saudis come with their troops and brigades, armor brigades, and settle down in that tiny country, no one protests. No one protests. Rather, they are supported. Even the Bahraini opposition doesn't have permission for demonstration, for conferences. In Gaza, well, you recall what happened in recent weeks. Israelis were suspicious that there are some, as they claim or call them, terrorist groups or resistant groups in Gaza. They bombarded some houses. Some children were killed. The Gaza and Hamas responded by shooting some rockets. Then they bombarded more and more. Who was the casualty of the bombardments? The militants? No. Nowadays it is completely revealed. Children, women, old men, non-militants. Even they bombarded a tall building which could not be miscalculated, which was the mass media building, and the journalists were there. And no one accused them. Rather, here in West, they said that this is the right of Israelis to defend their security. But is this right only exclusive for Israeli? The Palestinians do not have any right for maintaining their security? What is happening in Syria now? I will come to that, but as an example of double standard. Supporting and arming of extremist groups, which most of them are foreigners. You know, right now, according to authentic documents, more than 5,000 mercenaries, foreigner mercenaries, are fighting inside Syria under the brand of Al-Qaeda or jihadists, because jihadists, to some extent, are different from Al-Qaeda. And they are armed and supported financially by those countries which I mentioned and by Westerners. In that case, jihadism or Al-Qaedism is not bad. It should be admired. But in the United States or in Europe, anyone who has long beard should be arrested because he is suspected to be Al-Qaeda. Of course, I don't want to defend long beard. My beard is not long. And even I don't want to defend of those who have been arrested. I don't want to have any intervention in this regard. But I'm telling about double standards. Well, these were the root causes of problems in the Middle East. Now, what is the consequences of divide and rule strategy? Accumulation of regional conflicts. Most of past conflicts created by colonial powers since World War II have not been yet resolved, and new ones have been created. Like Palestinian conflict, Lebanese conflict, Kurdish crisis, Afghanistan civil war, and now Syrian civil war, Pakistan instability, Yemeni situation. This is the accumulation of crisis. Secondly, long-term rule of corrupted dictatorships. Global powers support dictatorships to keep their interests. And this is a real shame. Everybody remembers that Hosni Mubarak, up to last days, that there were even small hopes for his maintaining, was supported by United States administration and even by Europeans. Another consequence is accumulation of social, political, and economic problems. Mrs. LaRouche mentioned some figures, but there are much more than that, about the poverty, illiteracy, and social backwardness in the Middle East. You can compare Afghanistan. Even in Saudi Arabia, which is a very rich country, the differences between classes. In Yemen, which is a very poor country. And this is accumulating. In Egypt, loss of life of millions of people in internal and regional conflicts. As I told you, in Iraq and Afghanistan, 1 million people approximately have lost their lives. Apart from them are injuries, disabled, etc., etc. Billions of dollars cost for region and West these instability of the region. Widespread frustration. This frustration is a real dangerous phenomena, according to the experts, sociological and psychological experts' views. The major reason of extremism and joining of young generation to extremists is frustration, is being hopeless, losing the hope of the future. And this is as a reality which is happening there. Why in Libya, which was ruled by a very strong dictator like Gaddafi, nowadays you see the Al-Qaeda and extremism is getting power? What happened to American ambassador? Or what happened to Iranian doctors? Well, of course, due to the emperor of mass media, the taking hostage of Iranian doctors, 7 Iranian medicine doctors who were there for helping poor people in the Libya after those internal conflicts were taken hostage by pro-Al-Qaeda groups. And it was not reported by mass media, it was censored. Why it is happening in Libya? Who could imagine that in Libya, which is not a poor country, extremism is created and is growing? This is because of the frustration of young generation. They were frustrated during Gaddafi regime. They were more frustrated after his collapse and after invasion of Westerners there. Another consequence of this, which is not mentioned here, well, you know, in recent years, the unipolar system, which was invented by Blair and Bush after collapse of Soviet Union, nowadays, this theory is defeated, is not acceptable anymore. And emerging powers are coming to the scene. One of them is Russia itself. The other one is China. Of course, there are others like India. These emerging powers, they are not only economic powers. Rather, they want their share in political arena, in political scene. You see what is happening in United Nations regarding Syria. I'm sure not Russia nor Chinese are not lover of Syrians. Even they are not lover of Bashar Assad. Now they have defined new interests for themselves. And this is another consequence, that emerging powers, by definition of new interests for themselves, may intensify the conflicts. Coming to Syrian conflict are supported by 2 groups. Old colonial powers, namely UK, France, and United States, and their regional sectarian and ambitious allies, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, who are sectarians, and Turkey, which is an ambitious emerging power. The sectarian countries are in fear of that phobia, Shia crescent, that, well, Syrian government, Syrian regime is Alawite, they are friend of Iran, and they should be toppled down. Their concern is not democracy, because democracy in Syria was much more than Egypt or Yemen. Turkey, as an ambitious, emerging power which has many ambitions, and they have in their mind the Ottoman Empire situation. They want to resume their regional influences. Syrian conflict destabilized the whole region, Lebanon, Iraq, Turkey, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. And don't forget that by the destabilizing of these countries, the first region which will be affected is Europe. You can imagine what may happen in Turkey after the stabilization of Syria. Turk-Kurd conflicts, which has its backgrounds in decades, and even nowadays the Turkish army is involved in that. Can you imagine that? God forbid, if a civil war happens inside Turkey, what will be its effects in Europe? The extremism conflicts in Egypt, in Libya, in North Africa will be intensified after they get victory in Syria. Can you imagine that? What will happen if Afghanistan scenario repeats? You see the Afghanistan and Pakistan situation nowadays. Pakistan, as a supporter of Taliban extremist group, nowadays is victim of Talibans. You see what is the situation in Pakistan. Jordan, which, as most analysts say, that might be the first victim of this instability, because the system in Jordan is not a democratic system. People are frustrated. Meanwhile, the extremist group have their roots there. Palestinians are there. You can imagine what will happen in Jordan. Saudi Arabia, the discrimination and conflicts between Shia and Sunnis in Saudi Arabia and appeasing of the Shia movements in the oil-rich eastern part of Saudi Arabia. Terrorist groups that are trained in Syria then will expand to the whole world, especially Europe. Another issue, as an example of regional crisis, is Iranian nuclear issue. I don't want to go to the details. I don't have enough time. I only point out to some issues. The root cause of nuclear problem between Iran and West goes back to a double standard. Before Islamic Republic creation in Iran, this was United States who advised and recommended Iran to have nuclear power plants, not 1, 20. This plan was composed in Gerald Ford presidency. And according to advisors of Americans, German companies started the first project in Bushehr, and second one was started by French companies in Khuzestan, near border of Iraq. Immediately after Islamic Republic formed and Shah dictator regime was toppled down because of uprising of people, all these projects were stopped. Now, if you go to the files, even those days, enrichment was a part of that project. I think even a small child can raise this question. Why atomic energy, nuclear activity is legal, logic, and a part of development for a dictator regime, but it is illegal, it is dangerous, it causes security problems for a democratically elected government. Those projects, the Bushehr project was almost 85% complete by German companies, and they relinquished it. Iran's nuclear policy is based on our belief system, which is Islam. And these bases are, first, justice. We want to benefit from our rights according to NPT, we are from the first signatory of NPT in 1968. Second is resistance against discrimination. We are defending our rights and resisting against pressures. Thirdly, equality. Peaceful nuclear technology for all and nuclear weapon for no one, without discrimination. These are our belief and ideological aspects which is forming the nuclear policy of Iran And several times we have mentioned that we are ready for any type of legal control, but not discriminatory. Enrichment is a part of NPT. We cannot understand why Brazil can have enrichment and Iran cannot. Conclusion. Well, due to the topic of this conference, which is about new paradigm, along with what Madame Larouche said, I want to use different wordings for the same concept, new paradigm. This new paradigm can be established by, first, justice. Justice is one of the 5 principles of our belief system. Believing in God and its unity, believing in prophetness and Prophet Muhammad, believing in afterlife situation, believing in leadership of Imam, and justice. So justice is like, as we call it, Tawhid, or God's uniqueness. Secondly, believe in peace and justice for all political, religious, and ethnic groups in the region. If the new paradigm is based on this, it can be successful. There should not be any discrimination regarding justice, human rights, democracy, development among religious, ethnic groups and different countries. The values are human being values. They are not Western values. They are not ethnic values. They are not national values. These are human being values, and there should not be any discrimination on that. In Iran, we have a good example of peaceful living of different ethnic, religious, and political groups for the centuries. We have never had religious fights in Iran like what was here in Europe in 30 Years' Wars, and etc., etc. Even nowadays, although we have a very tiny minority, religious minority, we have about 300,000 Christians and about 25,000 Jews and about 20,000 Zoroastrians. The Christians have 3 members of parliament because it is not, well, I should tell you that in Egypt, although the Christians are much more than Iran, but they do not have even 1 member of parliament. Why? Because they do not have quota. The religious minority in Egypt are minority everywhere. So when they go to the vote boxes, definitely non-religious get the vote. In Iran, these religious minorities have quota, much more than Muslims. Because according to our law, each 300,000 Iranian has 1 member of parliament as representative. But the Christians with about 300,000 have 3. Jews with 25,000 have 1. Zoroastrians with 20,000 have 1. A good example of peace living of Jews and Muslims in Iran is a charity hospital which belongs to Jews in Tehran. It totally belongs to Jews. But usually Jews are rich people. They don't need to go to the charity hospitals. And this hospital is in a poor area of Tehran, in south of Tehran. 100% of patients go to this charity hospital are Muslims, and doctors, almost all of the doctors are Jews. And the chairperson of that charity is the member of parliament of Jews, who was in Germany a few months back. And he asked for an appointment with Jewish council, and Mr. Grauman, they rejected to give him this appointment. So this is the life in Iran. All tourists who go to Iran, they can see how is the situation of the churches. We have never had any religious conflicts in Iran. Bombardment peace and imposing peace by drones cannot last, will not last. In Afghanistan and Pakistan, this has been proven that it is not successful. Syrian destiny should be decided by Syrian people in a democratic way. The system of governance cannot be imposed. When we say people, we don't say that government or regime, we say people. And there are various mechanisms and even possibility of international observation on that. Foreign interventions have never led to peace and democracy and is contrary to that end. Islamic awakening is a reality, and West suffers from legitimacy and credibility because of past and current policies. It cannot be denied. Look to the results of the votes in those countries that have had this so-called Arab Spring, which was actually Islamic awakening. Our people in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain also should benefit from equal right and dignity. Look to the rights of Shias and how they are forbidden from having the posts. EU is main loser of instabilities in its neighborhood, Middle East. Instabilities will spill over to EU through immigration and terrorism. We live in a multi-power global system, and continuation of regional instabilities benefits emerging powers. Before wrapping up my speech, once again I want to point out a couple of points that Mrs. Larouche mentioned regarding these water projects. I should clarify that there is a huge project in Iran, and the task force now is working on that, and even the feasibility study has been done for connecting of Caspian Sea to Persian Gulf. You know, Iran, unlike Arabic countries, is not a deserted country. The area, only 1/3, almost 35% of Iran's area is desert. These deserts are laying in the center and southeast part of Iran, which, if a channel connects Caspian Sea to Persian Gulf, the flowing of the water, the humidity, and all those consequences will cause a green area there. And this project is confirmed by Iran, and now they are doing its engineering details. Another project is transferring of Tajikistan's water, because we know Tajikistan in Central Asia has a huge sources of waters. Transferring of those waters via Afghanistan to northeast of Iran, which is a very huge agricultural and touristic area. The northeast of Iran, we have a very important city, Mashhad. Mashhad is a pilgrimage area. Every year, 20 million pilgrimage go to Mashhad, and definitely they need water, they need fruit, they need food. And this is a project that, a tripartite project among Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and Iran. The connection of a railway in Iran is a priority. Now Iran is completely connecting Persian Gulf to Central Asia by 2 railroads, not 1. Pakistan is connected to our network, and our network was connected to Turkey's network and to Europe already. Iraq connection project is almost over, and Iran, due to its geopolitical situation, benefits from this transit situation. You mentioned about development of areas which have crisis. I can give you a good example of Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, we spent a lot for development of the border area of Afghanistan with Iran, which is called Herat. Now, everybody who has gone to Afghanistan says that seems that Herat is a different area or different country from Afghanistan, because in Herat they have asphalt roads, highways, they have enough electricity, they have small-scale industry, which all of them has been established by help of Iran. Thank you very much.